Time to face up to towering war machines, demons and monsters with a good old-fashioned cavalry charge? Let's talk about the leaked rules for the Rough Riders in the new Guard Codex. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're continuing to look at some Guard rumours, and another unit that I was very keen to see the new rules for were the Rough Riders, a unit that I think is really cool to see returning to the Guard book. I think perhaps their new incarnation of the models has divided people. Some people absolutely love the new look, whereas some people feel like maybe it's a little bit too fantasy. I guess seeing as they're competing against the Death Riders of Krieg for cavalry models in the Guard, that's already some quite stiff competition. I guess they probably wouldn't be too hard to convert though. Perhaps even a simple head swap on the rider would give them a fairly different feel. Games Workshop have already teased us a few rules with the profiles for their hunting lances, but that definitely leaves us with quite a lot of questions as to how they might work, so I thought their leaked datasheet would be quite interesting to go over. Again, full credit for the leak goes to Mr. Mordian Glory. This one's another datasheet from the leaked playtest codex that he posted, with some points, datasheets and weapon profiles from quite a lot of the book. I'll leave his channel links down below. Definitely well worth a look if you're one of the few Guard players who hasn't found his channel already. The leaks are from an early playtester copy of the codex, so there could well be fairly big changes between this and the actual release, but honestly I'd expect more things to remain the same than change. This does seem like a good way of getting a good initial taster of the rules before we get the full and finalised ones. Getting onto these actual leaked rules though, the Rough Riders are a fast attack choice within the Guard Codex. It still does appear that you'd be able to field them in squads of 5 to 10, which is how they were before they went to Legends. In their previous incarnation, I think they were very cheap, somewhere around 14 or 12 points, but it does seem that with a lot of additional combat power, they will be going up in points a fair bit. They're now apparently going to be 20 points each, so I guess that's a minimum size squad for 100 points, a fairly meaty unit compared with something like a cheap Sentinel. It is quite nice to see another alternate fast attack choice for the Guard though. Only Scout Sentinels, Armoured Sentinels and the Hellhound variants had the slot feeling very bare, particularly when there's so many options to choose from in the Elites and Heavy Support. Statline wise, and according to Mordian Glory, this is maybe the bit that's in the most question. Elite Statline has a 12-inch move, hit on 3s in combat and 4s at range, strength and toughness of 4, 2 wounds, 2 attacks, leadership 6 and a 4+ save. On top of that, the Sergeant gets an extra +1 attack and leadership 7, as you'd probably expect, and overall it does seem like a fairly reasonable profile, fairly in line with what I would have guessed. Perhaps the most obvious thing to compare it to are the Death Riders from Forge World. They're also 20 points, but they appear to be far hardier. They get 3 wounds and their 5+ feel no pain type save, but for some reason they got very underwhelming combat stats, only a single attack and hitting on 4s in melee. Really quite underwhelming for a unit that you'd imagine to be at least fairly good in combat on the charge. If this stat line does remain accurate, then hitting on 3s in combat with 2 attacks does seem pretty powerful, particularly given the hunting lance profile that Games Workshop showed us. For 20 points, particularly combined with things like orders and their special rules, I could see how they might become a bit much though. And to be honest, I wouldn't be entirely surprised if they do shift things around a bit, maybe have them hit in 4s on combat, or only get strength 3 or something. According to Mordian Glory's leaks, there are at least some chances that they'll do that. The stat line is a little bit uncertain though, but it does look like they'll be a little bit more fragile than the Death Riders, but they should have easy access to buffs at least. They both get the core and platoon keywords. Platoon appears to be the keyword that they need to get orders, so that will be good news for things like the fixed bayonets order for them. And they might well be able to get rerolls from things like Castellans or the new Lord Solar, who is apparently going to be on a horse, so might well be leading them into battle. Then, weapons-wise, Games Workshop have revealed the profile for the Hunting Lance. I must admit I did mess up slightly when I did the last video on this, and I misread the frag tip one. When you attack with the Hunting Lance, it appears that the frag tip gets you Strength User, AP -1 and Damage 1, but you get +2 hits on literally every hit that you make, not just 6s as you get with a few weapons, say like Necron Tesla. In theory that would give you every rider with an average of 3 Strength 4 AP -1 hits, which is pretty good horde clearance, particularly when they have the option to choose anti-tank instead, and go for the Melter Tip one with just the normal amount of attacks, but at Strength +2, AP -4 and Damage 3. Again, that looks like a very solid profile for chewing through elite infantry. Besides that, it seems that each rider also gets a lasgun and las pistol. We've seen the lasguns on the previews holstered in their horses' saddles, but it looks like compared with their previous incarnation, the mounts might not get any attacks themselves. Previously they got to make a few attacks with trampling hooves to represent their cavalry charge, they might be taken out, and it's just basically the rider that's going to be doing the damage now. Otherwise, in terms of options, in the preview pictures they did show the sergeant having a power sword of some sort. Apparently that's going to be a power saber, striking at strength +1, AP -3 and damage 2, and also give you +1 attack. It does seem a little bit weird on paper that might be better than a Space Marine Mastercrafted power sword or something, but I guess it's in the weird situation that if you actually want people to use a power sword, it needs to be at least as good as the hunting lance, so I guess its stats need to be at least sort of meaty. I'd guess that you get the option to use that instead of the lance rather than just having to replace it, as it looks like the model does still have the lance slung over their back, so I guess that could give the sergeant an alternate attack mode, and I guess that could make him a bit more efficient against Space Marines, I suppose. Finally, for options, among the different lances for the Rough Riders, it looked like one was a bit different, with some sort of electro-shocking attachment. Apparently that one's going to be called a Goad Lance for +5 points, and he can take 1 per 5, and that one's strength +2, AP -3, and damage 2. And it has a rule that's kind of similar to the Frag one. Each hit counts as 2 hits, and it's got some sort of mortal wound mechanic against vehicles, so should be extra dangerous at punching through tanks. Seems like really quite a good generalist profile to me. You wouldn't be able to swap it out for the frag or the melter tip, so it might be slightly less efficient against some outlier targets, but it does look like quite a good generalist weapon. Finally, for rumoured special rules, apparently they'll also be getting a +2 strength on the charge, and supposedly that will be on top of the lance profiles, so in theory that melter lance will be striking at strength 8, and actually make it a genuinely credible threat to tanks as opposed to really struggling against them and being better against elite infantry. I guess they are basically a melter bomb on a stick, so a strength of 8 isn't too surprising perhaps. It means that the frag lance seems a lot more brutal as well if that would go up to strength 6. Besides that, the squad also ignores movement penalties as well. That'll make them a bit better at moving in and out of terrain. I suppose if you're going to call them rough riders, then they're going to be okay at moving in and out of rough terrain. Overall, if those stats do wind up being accurate, it does make the unit a bit nutty. First up, it is just quite interesting having a guard melee unit of any description. We've only really got Borgrins as a dedicated one at the moment, so having something else that's really potent would be nice. And in particular, if Rough Riders do wind up being solid for this, then they're not just going to be a combat unit, but will be a fast combat unit as well, so it seems like they could be a really interesting choice if they are good. Again, if all of these stats do remain accurate, then it does look like they could be incredibly threatening to just about any target that they charge. The frag tips average something like 15 dead guardsmen if they are striking at strength 6. For standard Space Marines, you'd expect to kill around about 5. Terminators maybe 4 unless they had toughness 5 or a 4+ invul or anything. About 14 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle, or around about 5 wounds to a hard target's toughness 8 vehicle with 5+ invul and -1 damage. To be honest, those kind of numbers do maybe make me a bit skeptical as to whether or not they will be released in that exact form. I think it's kind of rare to ever make a unit quite that efficient both against heavies and against light infantry. So maybe the rumoured statline tone downs might actually come into effect. I feel like they could still be pretty efficient, even hitting on 4s or a strength 3 or something. The special rules I think would probably carry them. In particular, what seems very scary for them is that order to fix bayonets for the +1 to hit and the extra AP -1. If you could issue that order to them and then make a charge, then that seems pretty nasty. And even if their stat line did get nerfed, that could still likely make them very dangerous. I feel like their combat damage does likely need to be quite strong though. Their durability really isn't all that great. 2 wounds at toughness 4 with a 4+ save will go down pretty easily to either heavy shots or light infantry fire. Plus it's not like they'd be getting light cover or anything either, seeing as they're cavalry. Hopefully the final version of them will be efficient but not overpowered. I think at least a fair few guard commanders would quite like to be putting some cavalry back on the board and employ a bit of World War I era cavalry tactics. In any case, let me know what you think of these rumoured rules down in the comments below. If they're released with these stats, would they be too strong? Or do they need to be that dangerous if they're not all that hard to kill in the first place? If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly be talking more guard stuff. Looking forward to doing a few more unit overviews like this over the next few days. I also do thoroughly recommend checking out Mordian Glory as the original source for this, plus plenty more great guard content. Finally, I'd just like to quickly mention the Auspex Tactics Patreon page, which is what allows me to keep on making these videos quite so regularly. If you are enjoying quite a bit, then this is what allows me to keep on making 40k videos all the time, and you can find it linked down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.